Off. Hello, friend. Come sit with us again tonight. Last time we stood inside a smoke-filled room, listening to fiery beings call out a single word 3 times, shaking the very foundations beneath our feet. Tonight we meet a different kind of being entirely, ones appearing far more often across Scripture's pages and looking nothing at all like the soft, round-faced figures popular art has often imagined them to be. You can feel wind and storm pressing in from every direction at once, a sky splitting open with fire and brightness. You can see shapes moving within that same storm, each one carrying 4 faces at once, human and lion and ox and eagle, turning in perfect unison, wheels within wheels beneath them, moving wherever their gaze happened to turn, without ever needing to pause or change direction first. You can feel the particular disorientation of trying to describe something your own eyes have never encountered anything comparable to, or the way even the prophet witnessing this same vision seemed to struggle for adequate language throughout much of his own careful, extended description. You can sense, too, how far this scene stands from any gentle, comfortable image you might have previously carried about these same beings. A genuine, overwhelming encounter rather than anything resembling a soft, decorative figure. This is one more thread in the long story we have been walking together, night after night. And if this is your first evening with us, welcome. It is good to have you here. We remain tonight within this same collection of stories about beings from beyond the ordinary, visible world. And tonight's particular beings appear across Scripture considerably more often than the ones we sat with last time, in roles ranging from guarding sacred ground to carrying God's own throne itself. We have walked across this same series from a warrior sent to answer one man's anxious prayer to a messenger delivering news that would reshape the whole world, to fiery beings whose single cry has shaped worship across nearly 3,000 years since. Tonight adds another layer to this same picture, beings whose specific role centers on guardianship and mobility rather than conflict or vocal praise, or appearing across Scripture's pages far more frequently than either of the beings we have already considered together. If a story like this settles into you the way it settles into us, a quiet tap of a like helps more people find their way to this fire. And if you would like to walk with us again tomorrow night, there is a small bell nearby that means you won't miss it. Now, let the day go, let your hands unclench, and let's step into that storm and see what these strange, powerful shapes actually are. Cherubim appear considerably more often across Scripture than the seraphim we sat with together last time. Showing up in several genuinely different contexts, each one adding another piece to the fuller picture Scripture gives us of exactly what kind of beings these actually are. Their very first appearance comes early in this whole long story, at the closing of a garden gate, a scene some of you may remember from an earlier evening on this same road. After the man and woman were sent out of Eden, Scripture tells us God placed cherubim, along with a flaming sword, turning every way to guard the way to the tree of life. We are not returning to that full evening story tonight, but it is worth carrying forward this earliest, foundational role cherubim were given. Guardians of sacred, holy ground, stationed specifically to prevent unworthy access to something precious. This same guardian role appears again, considerably later in this long story, though in a very different setting, within the instructions God gave for constructing the Ark of the Covenant. the sacred chest meant to house the stone tablets of the law and to symbolize God's own presence dwelling among his people. You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, God instructed. Of hammered work shall you make them, on the 2 ends of the mercy seat. The cherubim shall spread out their wings above, overshadowing the mercy seat with their wings. Their faces one to another, toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubim be. Consider the specific craftsmanship this construction required, worth understanding a little further before moving forward into what this particular image actually meant. These 2 cherubim figures were to be hammered directly out of the same solid gold used to construct the mercy seat itself, or rather than crafted separately and attached afterward, a detail suggesting an unusually skilled or careful piece of metalwork, the entire structure, base and cherubim alike, emerging as a single, continuous piece of solid gold. Historians studying ancient metalworking techniques note that this particular method, or called repoussé work, required genuine skill and patience, slowly hammering and shaping metal from the reverse side to create raised, or detailed figures on the front, a technique well documented throughout the ancient Near East, and one that would have required Israel's own craftsmen to develop or import genuinely specialized skill in order to produce something of this scale and precision. This particular image is worth picturing carefully. 2 golden figures facing each other, wings spread and overlapping above a sacred covering, creating a kind of protected space directly beneath and between them. God himself specifies exactly where his own presence would meet with Moses, and through him, with the entire nation. There I will meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak with you. This detail matters considerably, worth sitting with slowly. The specific meeting place Scripture describes for God's own presence to speak most directly with his people was located precisely between these 2 carefully crafted cherubim. Guardians once again, though this time framing access to God's presence rather than barring it entirely. Consider how this same image develops the earlier Eden pattern in a genuinely significant, meaningful direction, worth sitting with directly. At Eden, cherubim guarded the way to the tree of life specifically to prevent access, a genuinely necessary consequence of humanity's own choice to disobey. Here at the ark, cherubim frame rather than block access, their wings creating a protected, sacred space where God's own presence would genuinely, actively meet with his people rather than remain permanently barred from them. This shift, worth carrying forward, suggests something significant about the wider trajectory of this whole long story. Guardianship gradually transforming from pure exclusion into a carefully framed, genuine invitation into renewed relationship and presence. Cherubim continued appearing throughout the wider furnishings of both the tabernacle and, later, the more permanent temple Solomon eventually built, woven directly into the fabric of the sacred curtains separating the temple's inner sanctuary from its outer courts, and carved into the temple's own wooden walls throughout its interior. This detail matters, worth understanding a little further, because it means cherubim were not simply present within one single dramatic scene, but rather integrated thoroughly and consistently throughout the entire visual and architectural language of Israel's own ongoing worship. A constant, repeated visual reminder of exactly the same guardianship and framed access the ark's own cherubim represented so directly. Solomon's own temple, historians and archaeologists studying this period tell us, included additional, considerably larger cherubim figures as well, two enormous statues carved from olive wood and overlaid with gold, or each measuring roughly 15 feet in height, positioned within the temple's innermost sanctuary, with their wings spread wide enough to touch both the temple's own walls and each other's wingtips, entirely overshadowing the Ark of the Covenant, positioned directly beneath them. Or consider the sheer physical scale this description requires us to imagine, worth sitting with directly. An inner sanctuary dominated almost entirely by these two towering golden figures, their combined wingspan creating a canopy of protection and presence considerably larger and more visually overwhelming than the smaller or intimate cherubim figures attached directly to the Ark's own mercy seat. Archaeologists studying the wider ancient Near East have discovered similar large-scale winged guardian figures at various sites throughout the surrounding region, including impressive winged bull and lion figures excavated at ancient Assyrian and Babylonian sites, or sometimes called lamassu, typically positioned at the entrances of major palaces and temples as protective or guardian figures. Their function within these neighboring cultures, broadly similar to the guardianship role Scripture consistently assigns to cherubim within Israel's own religious tradition. This wider ancient Near Eastern context helps us understand that Solomon's own decision to include large-scale guardian figures within his temple's construction reflected a recognizable, shared architectural and religious convention common throughout this same region, even while the specific theological meaning and purpose Scripture assigns to these figures remained distinctly rooted within Israel's own particular covenant relationship with God. Consider too how this same combination of smaller, more intimate cherubim figures on the ark itself, alongside these considerably larger, more monumental figures towering above within the temple's inner sanctuary, created a genuinely layered, multi-scale visual experience for anyone privileged enough to enter this same sacred space, worth imagining concretely. A priest permitted entry into this innermost sanctuary would have found himself surrounded by cherubim at multiple different scales simultaneously, the smaller, more delicate figures directly framing the ark's own mercy seat, and the considerably larger, or overwhelming figures dominating the entire surrounding space above and around him. Architectural and visual experience, deliberately designed, it seems, to communicate the comprehensive, inescapable nature of this same guardianship and presence. Cherubim appear again, considerably more elaborately still, in one of the most vivid and genuinely mysterious visions found anywhere in the whole of Scripture, recorded by the prophet Ezekiel while living in exile beside a river called Chebar. Ezekiel describes a great storm approaching from the north, and within it 4 living creatures, each with the appearance of a man, but each having 4 faces and 4 wings. Their form was that of a human, but each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Their faces, on closer description, were identified specifically as the face of a man, or the face of a lion, the face of an ox, and the face of an eagle, each creature possessing all 4 faces simultaneously, one facing each of the 4 cardinal directions. Consider what this specific combination of faces might have suggested to Ezekiel's own original audience, worth understanding a little further. Scholars studying ancient Near Eastern symbolism note that each of these 4 creatures Man, lion, ox and eagle was widely understood throughout this same ancient world as representing a kind of pinnacle or ideal within its own particular category, Orcave. The lion representing the greatest strength among wild animals, the ox representing the greatest strength among domesticated animals, the eagle representing mastery of the skies among birds, and humanity itself representing when the biblical worldview specifically, the pinnacle of God's own creative work, bearing his own image directly. A single creature combining all four of these same categories of excellence simultaneously would have suggested to any careful ancient reader a being of truly comprehensive, all-encompassing strength and mastery, oring together the greatest qualities scattered across the entire created order into one single, unified figure. Consider, too, the specific arrangement Scripture describes for these four faces, worth understanding a little further. Each cherub possessing all four faces at once, rather than four separate creatures, each bearing only a single face. This detail matters considerably, worth sitting with directly, because it means each individual cherub, on its own, already embodied this same comprehensive combination of strength and mastery Scripture associates with each of these four categories, rather than requiring four separate beings working together to represent the full range. This same combination suggests whatever else this particular detail communicates, it reinforces an image of overwhelming, comprehensive capability concentrated within each single created being, rather than distributed piecemeal across an entire group. It is worth noting, too, a related but distinct vision recorded much later in the New Testament's own final book, where the Apostle John describes four living creatures surrounding God's own throne, each one bearing only a single one of these same four faces respectively, rather than all four faces combined within each individual creature the way Ezekiel's own vision describes. Scholars continue to discuss honestly how directly these two visions, separated by many centuries, should be understood as describing identical beings versus related but distinct images, each writer developed somewhat independently within his own particular vision and its own specific literary and theological context. We name this genuine difference honestly, rather than assuming these two visions must describe precisely the same arrangement in every specific detail. Beneath these same living creatures, Ezekiel describes an equally strange detail: wheels, described as a wheel within a wheel, moving in perfect coordination with the creatures above them, their rims full of eyes all around. Whatever we make of the precise visual mechanics this vision describes, and Ezekiel himself seems to struggle for adequate language throughout much of this passage. The overall impression is one of overwhelming, almost incomprehensible mobility and awareness. Beings and wheels moving together instantly in any direction, watching in every direction at once, or supporting, as this vision makes clear a little later, the very throne of God's own glory moving above them. Consider this detail of eyes covering the wheels themselves a little further, worth sitting with directly. This particular image suggests something worth carrying forward about the nature of God's own awareness and presence, as this vision describes it, not merely mobile in every direction simultaneously, but also watchful, aware, missing nothing, across whatever direction this same throne chariot happened to be moving toward. The wheels themselves, ordinarily the most passive, mechanical component of any chariot or cart, are here transformed into something actively perceiving and aware. a detail emphasizing this whole vision's underlying insistence that nothing about God's own presence and movement through creation happens carelessly, blindly, or without full, comprehensive awareness. Later in this same book, Ezekiel explicitly identifies these same four living creatures as cherubim directly, confirming that this elaborate, almost overwhelming vision describes essentially the same category of being introduced so much earlier at Eden's own closing gate, and pictured so carefully atop the ark's mercy seat. This particular vision generated an entire, considerable stream of later Jewish mystical reflection and tradition, or sometimes called Merkabah mysticism, drawing its name from the Hebrew word for chariot, since later interpreters understood Ezekiel's vision as describing, in effect, God's own heavenly chariot throne. This mystical tradition developed considerably after the writing of Scripture itself was complete, representing later Jewish theological and mystical reflection, built upon this foundational vision rather than something Scripture itself develops in this particular direction. We name this honestly as later tradition, rather than as Scripture's own explicit claim. Consider a little further how this same mystical tradition actually developed across the centuries, following Ezekiel's own original vision, worth understanding for the sake of full honesty tonight. Jewish mystics, working across several centuries, particularly during the early centuries of the Common Era, developed increasingly elaborate meditative and visionary practices centered specifically on Ezekiel's original chariot vision, seeking their own direct personal encounter with the same heavenly realities Ezekiel himself had originally witnessed. This tradition, worth naming carefully, developed alongside and somewhat independently of the wider stream of rabbinic Judaism that became the dominant mainstream form of Jewish religious practice and interpretation following this same general period. And later, rabbinic authorities themselves expressed real caution about this particular mystical practice, restricting instruction in its more advanced techniques to only the most spiritually mature and carefully prepared students, aware of genuine risks some considered inherent in attempting this kind of direct, personal engagement with such overwhelming heavenly realities. A well-known rabbinic teaching from this same general period illustrates the seriousness with which this particular tradition was approached, describing four sages who reportedly attempted this same kind of mystical ascent toward the heavenly chariot, with only one of the four emerging from this experience unharmed and spiritually intact, the others suffering various forms of psychological or spiritual damage. The ancient account describes only briefly and somewhat cryptically. Whatever the precise historical accuracy of this particular account, its inclusion within later rabbinic literature reflects a genuine or serious caution surrounding this particular mystical practice, a recognition that direct engagement with the same overwhelming realities Ezekiel himself once witnessed carried real, acknowledged spiritual risk for anyone attempting it without adequate preparation or guidance. This same broader tradition of Jewish mysticism, worth noting briefly, continued developing across many subsequent centuries, eventually contributing to later, considerably more elaborate mystical systems, including what became known as Kabbalah, a body of Jewish mystical thought and practice that continued evolving and developing well into the medieval period and beyond. carrying forward in various transformed and expanded ways this same fundamental interest in Ezekiel's original vision and the wider question of how ordinary human beings might come to genuinely, personally encounter God's own overwhelming majestic presence. A related interpretive tradition developed within early Christian thought as well, worth naming honestly alongside the Jewish mystical tradition we just discussed, or several early church fathers, reflecting on the four distinct faces described in Ezekiel's vision: man, lion, ox, and eagle, proposed symbolic connections between these same four faces in the four gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, each gospel emphasizing, in this interpretive tradition, a different aspect of Jesus' own identity and ministry, corresponding to one of these four symbolic faces. It is worth noting honestly that different church fathers proposed somewhat different specific pairings. Irenaeus and Jerome, two significant early Christian writers, connecting these same four faces to the four Gospels in ways that did not always fully agree with one another on exactly which face matched which particular Gospel. This remains, again, later Christian interpretive tradition built thoughtfully upon Ezekiel's original vision, rather than a connection Scripture itself makes explicitly. Consider the specific reasoning behind at least one commonly proposed version of this same symbolic pairing, worth understanding a little further for its own interpretive interest. Some early church writers connected Matthew's own gospel, which opens with a genealogy tracing Jesus' own human ancestry, off to the face of the man, emphasizing Jesus' genuine humanity. Mark's gospel, opening abruptly with John the Baptist's own wilderness ministry, was sometimes connected to the lion, a symbol of untamed, powerful wilderness strength. Luke's gospel, with its own particular emphasis on Jesus' sacrificial, priestly role and his genuine concern for the marginalized, was sometimes connected to the ox, an animal historically associated with sacrificial worship. And John's Gospel, opening with its own soaring theological reflection on the eternal Word existing before creation itself, was sometimes connected to the eagle, an image of lofty, elevated vision reaching toward the heavens. We name this particular pairing as one commonly proposed version among several, worth understanding as thoughtful theological reflection rather than settled, universal Christian doctrine. There is something worth clarifying honestly here, before we move toward tonight's closing reflection, something that touches directly on our commitment to representing Scripture's actual content accurately, rather than relying on popular assumption. Centuries of Western art, particularly flourishing during the European Renaissance, popularized an image of cherubs as small, plump, childlike figures, often winged infants, an image that has become deeply embedded in popular culture, of holiday decorations and casual conversation about angels generally. This popular image bears essentially no resemblance whatsoever to the beings Scripture itself actually describes. Four-faced wheel-accompanied creatures of overwhelming power and mobility, guardians of Eden's gate, bearers of God's own moving throne. We name this honestly and gently, not to criticize anyone who has grown up with this same familiar, softer image, but simply because Scripture's own actual description offers something considerably more awe-inspiring and considerably stranger than popular culture's own softened, simplified version. Consider how this same popular transformation actually occurred historically. Worth understanding a little further for the sake of full honesty. art historians studying this development trace this particular shift substantially to Renaissance artistic conventions, where small, winged, childlike figures called putti, originally drawn from ancient Greek and Roman artistic tradition depicting minor deities like Cupids rather than from any biblical source whatsoever, or became widely popular decorative motifs throughout European art and architecture. Over time, particularly as this same artistic convention spread through popular religious art and eventually into broader popular culture, these same putti figures became increasingly, though inaccurately, associated specifically with the biblical term cherub, a linguistic and cultural drift that has left most people today considerably more familiar with this artistic invention than with Scripture's own genuinely different, considerably more awe-inspiring original description. Or consider, too, how this same artistic convention found its way into an enormous range of subsequent decorative and popular contexts, or worth understanding a little further, from greeting cards and holiday decorations to popular jewelry and casual figures of speech, describing an especially sweet or innocent-looking child as cherubic, a usage entirely disconnected from anything Scripture itself actually describes. This particular linguistic and cultural drift illustrates something worth carrying forward more broadly, or how easily popular culture can gradually reshape and soften genuinely challenging, awe-inspiring biblical images into something considerably more comfortable and familiar, sometimes losing, in that same process, much of the original text's own genuine power and mystery. It is worth naming, too, that this same softening tendency is not unique to cherubim specifically, but reflects a wider pattern worth watching for across many other biblical images and figures as well, worth carrying forward as a general posture of careful, honest attention whenever we encounter familiar religious imagery in popular culture. Whenever a scriptural image has become genuinely comfortable, familiar, and unthreatening within wider popular usage, it is often worth pausing to ask honestly whether Scripture's own original description actually supports that same comfortable or familiar version, or whether, as with tonight's cherubim, popular culture has gradually reshaped something considerably stranger and more overwhelming into something safer and more manageable for ordinary, casual use. Notice, too, the meaningful contrast between tonight's beings and the seraphim we sat with together last time, worth carrying forward as this evening draws toward its close. Seraphim, as Scripture describes them in Isaiah's single detailed vision, are associated primarily with continuous, vocal worship, calling out God's holiness without pause or rest. Cherubim, by contrast, appear consistently across Scripture in roles connected to guarding sacred space and bearing God's own throne and presence, movement, and protection rather than primarily vocal praise. Both categories of being remain closely, intimately connected to God's own immediate presence, yet each carries out a genuinely distinct function within that same close proximity, worth understanding as complementary rather than interchangeable roles. There is something worth carrying from tonight's evening into your own life, regardless of how much of the more elaborate historical and interpretive detail we have walked through tonight settles fully with you. Cherubim, across every single appearance we have considered this evening, consistently guard and carry something precious, a garden's access to life, a mercy seat where God's presence would meet his people, a throne carrying God's own glory through the sky above a river in a foreign land. Whatever precious, sacred thing feels vulnerable or exposed in your own life right now. If this ancient pattern offers a quiet reassurance worth sitting with tonight, that God has never once left what matters most to him unguarded or unattended, even when the guardians themselves remain entirely invisible to our own ordinary sight. Consider, too, how this same pattern of guardianship applies not only to sacred objects and holy spaces, but potentially to the wider unfolding of your own life as well, worth sitting with directly. Whatever you find yourself worrying might be exposed, undefended or vulnerable tonight, whether your own heart, your own family, your own hopes for the future. This ancient pattern of careful or consistent guardianship offers a gentle, patient invitation to trust that the same God who commissioned cherubim to guard Eden's gate and carry his own throne through Ezekiel's storm has not left whatever matters most to you similarly unattended tonight. Considers, finally, how the specific progression we walked through together this evening might offer its own quiet encouragement, worth carrying forward as tonight's closing thought. Cherubim began their scriptural story guarding something lost, access to Eden's tree of life, following humanity's own disobedience. They continued their story, framing something restored, the mercy seat where God's own presence would once again meet directly with his people. And they concluded their story, at least within tonight's particular survey, carrying something moving. God's own glory, traveling actively into a foreign land where his own exiled people needed reassurance that they had not been abandoned or forgotten. This same progression, from guarding what was lost, to framing what was restored, to carrying God's own presence directly into exile and difficulty, offers a pattern worth trusting in whatever season of loss, restoration, or difficult transition you yourself might be walking through right now. If you are carrying tonight some sense of exile yourself, distant from wherever you once felt most at home, most secure, most clearly within reach of God's own presence, Ezekiel's own vision offers you particular, direct comfort worth naming clearly. This same vision of God's mobile, cherubim-born throne arrived specifically to exiles, or people who had lost their own temple, their own land, and, by every outward measure, their own access to God's presence entirely. Yet God's own glory, this vision insists, had not remained behind in a now destroyed temple, waiting for these exiles to somehow return to it. It had traveled with them, carried by these same four-faced, wheel-accompanied guardians, directly into the foreign land of their own exile, meeting them exactly where their own difficult circumstances had actually placed them. Let this be a small prayer we say together quietly before sleep finds you. God, whose presence has always been guarded and carried by beings of overwhelming strength and mobility, thank you that what matters most to you has never once been left exposed or unattended. For anyone tonight who feels vulnerable, uncertain, whether what they hold most precious is truly safe, remind them gently that the same careful, powerful guarding that once framed your own presence between two golden wings has not stopped watching over what belongs to you. You are safe tonight. Whatever precious thing you are worried about tonight, your own heart, your own family, your own hope, it has not been left unguarded. Let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders soften into the stillness of this evening. You can rest. On another night, we will turn from these powerful, otherworldly guardians toward a gentler, or personal question many of us have wondered about at some point in our own lives. whether each of us might have our very own guardian angel watching over us individually. What Scripture actually says, and does not say, about this widely held, comforting idea. Oh, but that is a thread for another evening. Tonight, let the guardians who have never once left their post be enough. Let the evening be good. Sleep well, friend, whatever you hold most precious tonight. It rests within the same careful watching that has guarded sacred things since the very earliest evenings of this whole long story. And that watching has not once looked away.